What's going on, guys? James or Claw Gaming here. We're actually going to be doing something a little bit different for this channel. I'm going to be doing a copper plate mod on these RTX A2000s. These copper plates are from coolmygpu.com. The link will be in the description below. I'm not affiliated with them. This is not a sponsorship from them. I was curious on how to get the temperatures a little bit lower on my RTX A2000s. And so this came across my feed one day and I was like, sure, why not give it a shot? So it comes with 5 plates and it comes with some thermal paste, which I decided to use. Here are a couple of things additional that I wanted to do as well. 99% isopropyl alcohol to get some cleaning done. Capped on tape if I wanted to make sure nothing shorts. I didn't end up using it because of the way the board was laid out. There wasn't enough room to put it on. So I left those out. And then these are the copper plates or the copper shims. They are machined out to fit perfectly around the GPU die itself, and they fit perfectly between the cooler and the memory chips themselves. So this is an RTX A2000, it's a Quadro series card, so it's almost like for a workstation or editing computer. It doesn't require PCI power. It gets all its power from the riser slot. And then I have some alcohol pads to clean off any residue from the thermal pads and the thermal paste. I have a couple of thermal paste tubes. I'll be using the Noctua ones for the GPU itself, and then I'll be using the MX4s, I believe, for the MX4 for the copper plate and the memory modules. I do have a little neck lamp, so it's a little bit easier for me to look at all the screws. So it's very simple to take apart. You do have to unfortunately disassemble the whole GPU to get to the dies themselves, which is fine. On other like gaming GPUs, you'll see that it either requires 3 to 4 screws just to pop off the cooler, and then you have access to all the modules and things like that. So you'll be working with a T6 Torx for these smaller screws on the back plate and the support bracket, and then a T8 for these 2 screws on the back of the blower, or back of the vent pretty much. So you have to remove the support bracket first. So there's 2 on the back plate and then 2 on the back of the cooler itself. Once those two are off, the support bracket will pop off, and pretty much it's a blower style cooler, so you'll see the fins on the inside. And then there's going to be 4 additional screws, which are T6 Torx, and those will just come off normally. Once those 4 are off, you'll see that there is that little black bracket that holds the cooler itself in place. Once you get those 4 screws off, basically the blower itself will separate from the PCB. Be careful when you're lifting this up because there is a fan connector on there. So you can fold it over to one side and have full access to it. I know you're not supposed to be pulling on the connectors themselves, but it was just a little bit easier for me, and connector's not that tight in there. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it does slot in, does take a little bit of force, but eventually it does pop out. So it's a simple blower, and it's pretty much just empty on all the way through. The only thing that's cooling this is pretty much that fin assembly right there, and that's pretty much all it. It's super basic. But yeah, as I said, there's 2 screws holding on the spring-loaded backplate for the cooler itself. I like to unscrew these almost like a wheel on a car, one side at a time, either half turn at a time or quarter turn at a time, just to keep the pressure a little bit even. Once it does get a little more loosened up, I did put some pressure on it so it's not pulling on the screws themselves and they just pop out. Same thing when you're reapplying it, you don't want to push down on it, you want to put some pressure on the plate so it release some of the pressure. It'll be easier to screw in later on in the process. Once you have that off, it's going to be similar to pulling off a cooler on a CPU. You want to wiggle it gently side to side until it pops out. The thing that's holding it together is going to be the thermal paste on the GPU die itself and the memory modules. The memory modules, I believe, are 2mm or 1.5mm thermal pad. I didn't measure them, but they're pretty thick, so if you freeze frame it, you can probably tell right away what kind of thermal pads they are. I did open up this GPU before to replace the thermal paste with the Noctua one, but it's coming near the summer and I want to make sure that the thermals stay within range. So knocking two birds with one stone. We'll do the copper plate mod and replace the thermal paste on the GPU die. I'm just sizing it up, trying to make sure it fits properly. So then I will remove the thermal pads and the old thermal paste, use the alcohol pads, use Q-tips or ear tips to get the thermal paste off and any residue left by the thermal pads on the memory chips. So when that part's cleaned off, I'll just move on to the GPU die. I'll be using the 99% isopropyl alcohol. I just use the cover to pour a little bit of alcohol in there so I can just dip the Q-tips in there so I can clean off the die itself. Get it all nice and cleaned up before I add new thermal paste. For those that worked on PCs and thermal paste before, you'll want to notice that it does get pretty messy, so you want to have a clean Q-tip every now and then, just double check you're not spreading around any of the old thermal paste. It could cause some inconsistencies with the temperature, so roll around the Q-tip as much as you can, try to get as much surface off of it. So I'm just scrubbing off any residue with a thermal pad, with a alcohol pad. I think these alcohol pads are like 60 or 70% isopropyl alcohol in them, so it didn't really cut out the grime and the stickiness. So I did take a Q-tip and put it in the 99% and just pretty much let it sit there for a couple of seconds before rubbing it off again. Once the GPU die is all nice and cleaned up, I'm going ahead and clean off the individual memory modules on here. There's 6. This is a 6 GB card. There is a 12 GB version, but I have the 6 GB versions. So there is a little bit of leftover thermal pad residue on top of the chips. I want to clean those off so we have proper contact with the copper plate. Once all that's cleaned up, I put that to the side to dry, and then I'll take one of the copper plates I'll be using. I'm going to clean this up, 99% isopropyl alcohol, clean Q-tip, and then just clean off the surfaces. I don't know if there's any machining residue or any oils or anything like that from when they cut this or when they machined it. So I just want to make sure I have a clean surface to work with. As I go through the other GPUs, of course I'll clean off the other plates, so there's no like fingerprints or any leftover oils that can cause anything in the future. So let's get those nice and cleaned off as well. They seemed fine out of the box, but you can never be too sure, you know? Alright, so I'll set the copper plate aside to dry, and then we'll bring back the GPU PCB itself. And then I'll take some of my NT-H1 Noctua thermal paste. I'll put that onto the GPU die. I usually do like a small little, maybe a little pea size, maybe smaller, because this is a lot smaller than a regular GPU die that I'm used to, like on a 3000 series card when I'm repasting it. So just enough to cover maybe the logo or something on there in the middle, and then when you put pressure down, it'll spread out evenly. Once the GPU die is done, I want to just make sure I have the copper plate lined up properly. I'll make sure I have it flipped over to the right side. I did have to bend this one a little bit because I think either in shipping or when I was unboxing it, it bent a little bit. So I just slowly applied a little bit of pressure on it so it clears the GPU PCB. This is when I wanted to use Kapton tape, but as you can see, the modules are actually really tightly close together. And I was worried at first about it shorting it because it is copper, but it actually worked out pretty well. It was actually a really nice, clean fit. I'm going to go ahead and apply some thermal paste onto the memory modules themselves so they have a complete surface to attach to the copper plate. You could skip this step, it's not really needed, but for me, just to get the maximum coverage or the maximum contact with the thermal pad, with the copper plate to the memory modules, I added a little bit. I just tore off a piece of an alcohol pad wrapper and I just decided to spread it that way. You don't have to spread it, well, once you put the copper plate and add pressure to it, it'll pretty much evenly spread it out. But I didn't want any to like spread over the edge of the memory chip, so I just lightly, as best as I can, try to flatten it as much. Later on in the video, you'll see I'll actually use a little spatula that comes in my Ifixit kit to really even it out and spread it out really nice. It is doing it this janky way. But this is my first time doing this, so don't rip me in the comments. Later on in the video, you'll see that I did it a little bit better for sure. But yeah, this is my first time doing a copper plate mod, since they don't really have any other third-party coolers for the A2000 series. So it actually came out pretty well. You'll see the results towards the end of the video. And then here on top, I'll be adding some thermal paste, pretty much a line going directly up and down the left and right side where the memory modules are, so that when it gets in contact with the cooler, it has as much thermal contact as possible. I want to maximize the cooling performance, because these do get really hot. The A2000's cards, when they're mining, 41, 42 mega hashes a second per card, only uses 70 watts of power, but the memory modules themselves can get as high as 102 or 105 depending on the ambient temperature and how you're cooling them. I applied a little bit of pressure so it sticks firmly, and then pretty much you're going to be reversing the process from here on out. This is the spring-loaded backplate. Similar thing to a car, add a little bit of pressure on the back plate so that so the spring doesn't pull on the screw. Slowly tighten it, not all the way, and then same thing for the other side. You want to add a little bit of pressure on the back plate, screw it in, and then evenly on each side do like a half turn or a quarter turn until the screws bottom out. Then put the fan connector back in, and then pretty much just flip the whole PCB back onto the cooler itself. Line up the screws. Everything will just snap back into place. There's a little lineup tool on the PCB itself, so it only clips in one way. And then you'll take your T6 Torx, pretty much in a star pattern or any pattern. It doesn't really matter how you screw it in. Usually I do a star pattern with the screws and just go around the perimeter. So these four directly connect into the PCB, into the fan cooler itself. And the ones on the right side of the screen, you'll see those connect into the support bracket for the PCI slot. So you want to do those last. So here's the PCI support bracket, or PCI slot bracket. Like I said, you want to do these two back plate screws last, and then you'll use a T8 Torx for the two screws on the back of the vent. So when that's all done, I'm gonna go ahead and just test this GPU. I want to test one GPU before I do all the GPUs. So I ended up just closing this up and wiping it all down, make sure there's no fingerprints or anything like that. Then I'll bring it over to the mining rig and then I'll plug it in, make sure it works, let it run for about 15-20 minutes, let it stabilize, and then we can compare the temperatures. You'll be actually surprised with the results. It's quite amazing. I'm just going through all the screws, making sure they're hand tight, maybe a small little quick tiny millimeter turn to make sure they're all tightened down. Take an alcohol pad, cleaning off any fingerprints, any residue left over. After that, we'll take it over to the mining rig and then we'll put it in and see if it works still. Hopefully I don't have a $700 paperweight. Alright, so we're at the rig now. This is the first copper plate mod on the first GPU. I do have 5 of these. So plug it in, put the thumb screw on there, and then we'll turn it on. The rig will automatically turn on once power is applied to it. I did that so that if there's any power outage or anything, the computer will turn itself back on and restart the mining process. And then we'll go over to the screen or my computer, and then we'll access the interface, and then we'll see if the GPU runs cooler or if I just broke this thing. But so far it boots up nice, and let's go see what it says on NiceHash. Alright, so we're in here on NiceHash. I do have the mining rig on a remote desktop. So I just log into Chrome Remote Desktop, and then I can see the rig stats and everything like that here. Right now, it's doing at the current rate for Bitcoin. It's on 3 GPUs, it's $4.60 a day. And then these are my overclock settings on MSI Afterburner. Here you'll see the temperatures. GPU temperature 1, GPU temperature itself is 69 degrees, and then memory temperature is 86 degrees. I'll post up a screenshot real quick of the before. Before, the temperatures were about 70 to 80 on the GPU, and then it was almost 92 to like 100 degrees on the memory. So it's between a 10 to 15 degree difference on temperatures themselves. It's a little bit warm here in California now, so the temperatures are a little bit higher. During the winter and spring, I expect those to go down to maybe low 60s on the GPU, and then maybe even lower 80s or high 70s on the memory. So we'll go ahead and pretty much repeat the process 4 more times on the rest of the GPUs. I'll fast forward through all this. I'll give you guys some different angles and some pictures of how the process goes, in case you want to do this to your A2000s. You could either skip this part or jump ahead towards the end for the final results of the before and after screenshots. But it was actually pretty successful. If you're worried about temperatures and you need to figure out a way, or if they don't make a proper cooler for maybe your Quadro series card, maybe this could be your next solution for that. Cool My GPU, I'm not associated with them. I'm not an affiliate or anything like that. Their link is in the description below, so if you wanted to buy copper plates for any GPU that they offer, feel free. They do have a lot of different choices available. And then for each one, I'm of course going to test each card individually on the rig. I want to make sure that I didn't short anything, I didn't brick the card, I didn't make sure the temperatures are normal across all the cards. I don't want anything being a high temperature spike or a low temperature spike. Make sure nothing's shorted out, of course. So yeah, I'm testing each one individually after I complete it. So here are the temperature screenshots of the GPUs themselves. 75 degrees Celsius on the graphics card, probably the maximum it hit, and then 102 degrees Celsius on the memory modules themselves. And then on the after picture, you'll see that temperature has dropped almost about 10 degrees. Yeah, from 73 degrees to 61 degrees. So a 10 degree difference on the GPU. And then it dropped down to 82 degrees. So current is 82 degrees Celsius after the copper mod. Before the copper mod, it was 100 degrees Celsius constant. So that's a 20 degree difference. 20 degrees. Also depends on the area you live in and the ambient temperature. So take that in mind. These are under my conditions in the mining rig. So and it's in a server cabinet, so they will probably be relatively higher to other miners. But I use a server cabinet just for noise reduction, and I live in an apartment, so it actually does help heat up my apartment as well. The heat coming off of the mining rig heats the rest of the apartment, so I don't have to turn on the heater or the cooler or anything like that, or have to turn on the AC at all. But thanks for watching, guys. Links to all the items and tools that I use are below. So take some time to look through that, and thank you for watching. If you guys like this content, feel free to give me a like. If you have any questions about it, feel free to drop a comment or send me an email or anything like that. But thanks for watching, guys. Take it easy. See you in the next one.